listening to GWP Weekly Recap. I'm your host, Isaac Hedges, joined once again by co-host Jacob Ulmer. In our top stories tonight, we'll be revisiting the Iran conflict, looking at the ongoing debate over birthright citizenship, and the recent Artemis II launch. All that and much more coming your way on GWP Weekly Recap. So, Jake, as you've likely heard, there have been some major recent developments relating to the war going on in the Middle East right now with Iran. Something about a jet, something about it. Was it shot down? Is that correct?
Yes. There was a U.S. fighter jet that was shot down earlier this morning or earlier during the day. And so, yeah, that was luckily there was one who was able to escape.
One who was able to escape. So presumably there were at least a couple of guys on that plane. At least one of them was able to make it out alive, thankfully. But it sounds like, sadly, at least one of them was not. Is that correct?
Well, the other two have not been found, but are currently there's an ongoing search for their location. But one of them was rescued.
All right. So the other two on board have not yet been found. So again, it's possible that they're still alive out there somewhere. But again, the longer things go on, things are not looking too great. So certainly for those pilots, the guys aboard that plane, certainly could use your prayers in the case of that. Again, that's serious, being shot down. So again, it would be nothing short of a miracle again for not just one of those guys to survive, but a couple of others. So it's not clear currently what exactly their location is. Haven't been
Yes,
found yet, but yes, we will continue to follow that, Jake.
we've got just a quick correction on that. It turns out that there was not two others, there was two total, and so the other one has not been found. It turns out that the one that was rescued was the pilot, and that some are claiming that Iran may have captured the other person on board, but that has not been verified. That is a thought as to what could have happened.
Absolutely. So mere speculation at this point. And Jake, thank you for the new update. That is some great information. So we now know that there were only two people aboard the plane, and the pilot was able to get out of it alive, thankfully. The other person aboard the plane is not clear at this point exactly their location. Again, there's been speculation that they were captured by Iran, but again, no solid evidence at this point, so it still is all speculation, but we will continue to follow that. Again, a number of places you can find our coverage on that. You can find that here, of course, on GWP Weekly Recap. You can also find that at the beginning of each week on GWP News Weekly. Comes out each Monday. We occasionally also cover breaking news as it happens on GWP Live. And well, breaking news, there's only so much likelihood that you're going to be able to anticipate those things. Again, you're not always able to anticipate breaking news. It's called that for a reason, but we will, to the best of our ability, let you folks know whenever we are going live, put out a post or something on YouTube, a little bit of a notice that we are going to go live around a certain time. So you want to stay tuned for all of that and more from Great World Productions. So again, just terribly tragic, this plane being shut down, but again, could be a lot worse because we know that the pilot survived. He got out of it alive. It's not yet clear the position of the other fellow aboard. Again, it's possible there's been speculation that he was captured by Iran. Jake, is there anything else we know about this recent jet that was shot down by Iran?
Yes, of course, this was one of the biggest stories that's came into us today about the Iran war. Just a couple of other small little details about it. American forces is what was able to, or they were the ones who were able to rescue the pilot. So just kind of some information on how the pilot was able to escape that situation. The other thing that we know about this is that this U.S. fighter jet is a U.S. F-15E fighter jet. So that is specifically what the type of fighter jet that it was.
Absolutely. Yes, some great information there, Jake. A US F-15E fighter jet. So, again, if anyone out there was wondering exactly what the model was, again, that was the particular sort of jet that was shot down. Now, beyond that, a number of other developments recently on the conflict in Iran. And of course, for more in depth coverage, you can catch that on GWP News Weekly coming up very soon on Monday. And now, Iran at this point, of course, as we know, is still leveraging the Strait of Hormuz as strategic pressure. Again, sort of trying to get their interest through. Again, not many countries able to get that oil, again, that often is exported through the Strait of Hormuz from those Gulf countries across the Middle East. We know at this point, Jake, correct me on this if I'm mistaken, I believe it's just China that is able to access oil through the Strait of Hormuz. And again, that's influenced things to some degree here in the United States, to a greater degree across Europe. There's some more reliance on the Gulf countries for the oil there, which again, in turn, influence those prices, which again can affect you at the pump, can affect those gas prices in terms of how this is affecting everyday Americans. So that is also something we've been covering extensively right here on GWP Weekly Recaps and GWP News Weekly. There have still been some ongoing attacks on shipping. Of course, that oil shipping, including a strike on the Panamanian flagged Aqua One tanker near Qatar. So, again, just one of those recent attacks. Now, Israel, of course, which is allied with the United States in this recently, was able to strike 15 weapons production sites. So, again, that was also one of the objectives of the United States, sort of on the notion that Iran was developing nuclear weapons, which posed a real threat to the United States. And again, so that's what we're looking at here when we talk about taking out weapons production sites in Iran. Iran has also launched one of its largest missile salvos of the war, which included a 10 missile barrage targeting Israel. So certainly they still are fighting back again. So it remains to be seen how exactly things will shake out in this conflict. But again, what is clear, what is indicated at this point, is that, again, neither of the parties at the conflict seem to be giving up or letting up at this point, for better or for worse. Now, Iran recently fired 19 drones and 4 ballistic missiles at Bahrain, making a widening regional battlefield. Again, marking that wider regional battlefield. Hezbollah, an organization in the area, of course, a widely known terrorist organization. Many of the folks at home have likely heard of one of those many organizations, beginning in H, conducted 71 attacks on northern Israeli communities and military positions within a 24-hour window. In terms of other recent developments in Iran, the Houthis, another one of those H organizations, one of those terrorist organizations, launched ballistic missiles at Israel, their fourth such attack since entering the conflict. So, just a few recent developments. And, Jake, is there anything else you might add on what exactly is going on in Iran at the moment?
Yes, I thought we would just report some of the newest information that we have. We know that this fighter jet that was shot down, that took place in southern Iran. We also know that 2 other American aircraft came under fire while trying to rescue the pilots from the F-15 fighter jet. And then we also know that there has been a video that actually appears to show these 2 helicopters trying to rescue the pilots. And we also know that Iran's state media still claims that Iranian forces shot down the plane. So that's some
Absolutely.
additional information that we know about the war in Iran, specifically about that U.S. fighter jet that was shot down. But we have some other issues that are going on here in the U.S. What do we know about the birthright citizenship?
Absolutely, Jake. Yes. Something also going on right here at home. Again, moving on from international affairs and kind of back home to the United States. Well, we've recently seen this, of course, play out over the course of the past year. Again, one of sort of the intentions, one of the things that President Trump set out to accomplish early on as part of his administration was to do away with birthright citizenship, which is a long-standing citizenship policy here in the United States. And initially, he intended to sort of do that by executive order, and again, kind of attempted to do that. And there were certain folks out there that considered it unconstitutional. There are hearings going on now in Supreme Court relating to that. Again, whether or not to keep birthright citizenship around. So again, that has been a long-standing policy of the United States since 1866. Again, that people born on American soil, otherwise subject to the jurisdiction thereof, are considered U.S. citizens. Now, again, there have been numerous interpretations of that, and again, that subject to the jurisdiction thereof clause allows some room for interpretation. For example, we saw a recent instance of this, a recent question asked in Supreme Court, actually, with his hearings going on, was would an Indian, an American Indian, be considered a birthright citizen? And it was an interesting point because initially they were not. They were not considered U.S. citizens as part of that original sort of birthright citizenship clause, but there was later legislation that sort of fleshed that out, and that was in 1924. That was the Indian Citizenship Act of 1924. Previously, they were considered sort of as the Indian tribes. It kind of predated the establishment of the United States as something separate, and so they were considered sort of under that subject to the jurisdiction thereof clause in that again amendment that allows for birthright citizenship. So again, some important distinctions to make on that front. And again, this has been debated very vigorously. And again, on one hand, you have those suggesting that birthright citizenship has been abused. Again, perhaps certainly the folks early on who introduced the policy again, and the whole notion of the uh, American dream. Again, the promises of being born here, certainly those were well meaning. It's just that people in recent times have abused that in the case of immigration, with people coming in illegally and having what they call anchor babies. Again, sort of just coming in illegally, somehow able to slip in, again, due to some lapse in security, and they're able to have their children here, even though they're not themselves a U.S. citizen. So, again, that is sort of why this has come into question. In recent times, there's been suggestion that the policy of birthright citizenship has been abused. And again, on the other hand, there are those that suggest that this would be a little bit too much of a change. Believe, if there's nothing else you might add, my friend, that about covers the most recent developments on the situation with birthright citizenship in the United States. That is a major issue and a developing one at that. So we will continue to cover it here, of course, on GWP Weekly Recap and over on GWP News Weekly. You'll want to catch that coming up very soon on Monday. In the meantime, something very exciting happened just recently, the launch of a rocket. Again, the first time since Apollo 17 that we've launched a fully manned space mission going to the moon. Of course, that is just one of the parts of the Artemis II mission. Jake, what else can you tell us about this launch that we recently saw?
Yeah, so we know that there was some, of course, this is a really big mission in order to, for preparation for Artemis 3, as well as Artemis 4, and even Artemis 5 as well. And so that is one thing that we do know is that those missions are scheduled to be taking place in the next several years. And so this will be a really big step towards that. Of course, we covered that a little bit. That took place Wednesday evening, is when that launch took place there from the Space Coast on Wednesday. But there was a bit of an issue that developed, not a really big issue, with the toilet that was actually on Artemis 2 was not functioning properly. And so that actually led to it actually
Led to a great deal of question, I'd imagine, as to how exactly this happened. Again, on a spacecraft, again, something so expensive in terms of what all goes into it, in terms of all of the studies, all the production. Again, that isn't just your ordinary toilet, I'd imagine, Jake.
Yes, in fact, the cost is estimated to be nearly $30 million. That is how expensive that toilet is there on the Artemis II. So, of course, there were some concerns that a $30 million repair would have to be made, and that would be, well, I guess you could say kind of a stinky situation if it continued. But luckily, that was able to be resolved very quickly, and so the $30 million toilet will be able to be fixed. And so that does wrap things up on the news side of things. Now we'll move into weather.
So, moving on to weather, Jake, what is our weather looking like?
Yeah, so first we'll kind of look at the national alerts here across the country. So you'll notice that we have quite a bit of winter alerts here across the northern plains. We're looking at up to a foot of snow this weekend across the Dakotas and Minnesota, the same areas that just had some snow back on Wednesday and Thursday. And then we've also got some ice across northern Wisconsin and northern Michigan here. So ice storm warnings in effect for those areas, as we could be looking at an additional quarter to a half an inch of ice that could lead to many travel difficulties and some power outages and stuff like that there across the Great Lakes. We've got a fire threat today out west or west of us, not necessarily out west, but west of here. And then we've got flood watches here across the Red River Valley extending into northwestern Arkansas. That's where some of the heaviest of rain is going to be over the next couple of days. And then even some alerts here in northern Maine as well. So that's kind of what we're looking at as of right now. Of course, we've had quite a bit of rain over the last couple of days, and so we've got more in the forecast. But here's where we're at currently on our rainfall totals. This does not account for some of the rain that we had the last couple of days. This only goes through April 1st. So any rain that we had yesterday is not included in these totals. But you'll notice that we're now up to 6.5 inches of rain for the year in Nevada, just over 7, so slightly more in Columbia. And so as far as we now have those March totals, and we average about 3.3 inches of rain in March. We had about 2 inches in Nevada, so we were slightly below average. On the other side of things, we were slightly above average, where we had 3.8 inches, with the average being about 3 inches. And then as we go into the month of April, of course, we've already had a little bit of rainfall in the month of April, with about 1.5 inches here in Columbia, with less than half an inch in Nevada, with the averages being around 5 inches of rain. Typically, this is the wettest month in the month, or yes, this April is the wettest month for Columbia and is typically the second wettest month in Nevada, with May being the wettest month there in Nevada. And then we have about 2 to 4 inches of rain in the forecast that we're going to be showing you here in just a moment.
Absolutely, Jake. As you mentioned, just some of the rainfalls tracking a little bit below average here in Nevada, and looked like you said it was a bit above average there in Columbia. And well, along the course of this week, we've had a bit of a dreary week, a decent amount of rain and storming. So we'll have to see. I'm sure we're getting that to hear momentarily, but how exactly things are going to look, if it's going to continue to be dreary, or how things are expected to shake out for our Easter weekend.
Yeah, so we've got definitely the risk for severe weather as we go into tonight. Here's from the weather story from the National Weather Service in Springfield, putting out showing that slight risk that we do have across pretty much the entire viewing area. And so our main hazards are going to be quarter-size hail, winds of 70, maybe even 75 miles per hour, and then a few isolated tornadoes, as well as some heavy rainfall that could lead to some flooding. So we have a slight risk for severe weather as we go through tonight. We have, well, the first thing that we have is in a couple of hours, we're going to have some pop-up thunderstorms that are going to be developing. These are going to be isolated supercell thunderstorms that could produce large hail and tornadoes. And then during the evening and overnight hours, we're going to have a line of severe thunderstorms. And this is really where our main threat is going to be at, our highest chance for storms here across the state of Missouri. And you'll notice our western counties will get into that around 6 to 10 p.m., probably making it through Nevada and Joplin at about 7 or 8 o'clock. And then it will move into central Missouri, so the eastern portion of our region, between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. And then, of course, out of our viewing area by 2 a.m. So most of our thunderstorms will be between 6 p.m. and 2 a.m. And so our window for doing our severe weather live stream coverage, we will be doing that coverage sometime, not the entire time, but sometime between 6 p.m. and 1 a.m. We will have live coverage here on GWP as needed.
Absolutely, and you'll want to stay tuned for that. Again, we can predict only to a certain degree. So again, we're not 100% sure right now exactly when we will be going live, but that is kind of the general bracket for when you can expect to stay tuned for that. Again, as soon as we get more insight on that, we will post YouTube channel letting you all know that we're going live to report on severe weather. So you'll want to stay tuned for that, again, to be prepared for all those severe weather circumstances and sort of for the general what to do in the case of severe weather. Well, we've got an entire video dedicated to that GWP severe weather preparedness. So if you haven't already, you'll want to check that out. But again, a number of things. So a bit of severe weather, some storming as you look like Jake moving across Missouri, moving southeast across Missouri throughout the night. So coming up very soon. So you'll have to stay tuned for that right here on GWP. Jake?
Yeah, so here's kind of a more national view showing you that area that's going to be under the severe risk. So as you go north of our viewing area, north of Interstate 70, we have that enhanced risk. But at least for us here, we've got that slight risk that's in effect for us. Tornado threat, we are under that hatched area, so EF2 tornadoes or stronger are going to be possible. We are not under the hatched region for wind, so that's good news. So our winds should be below hurricane force, but we are under the hatched area for 2 inch or greater hail. So that's something that we're going to be watching for. So 2 inch or greater hail, and then 70-mile-per-hour winds, and then the possibility of a few EF2 tornadoes or stronger is going to be a possibility. And then, as always, we mentioned that flood threat here that we have, a slight risk. That's a 2 out of 4 on the Weather Prediction Center scale when it comes to the flooding. As far as the timing, again, we've kind of already looked over this a little bit, but you'll notice this afternoon we're going to get a few pop-up storms. So starting really, within the next couple of hours, I would say, if not already now, we will start seeing some of those pop-up thunderstorms. At time of recording, there wasn't any thunderstorms across the area, but likely when you're watching this here at home, we've started to see those. But then again, around 7 or 8 o'clock, the line will start to move into western Missouri, and then it will move into central Missouri around 11 o'clock. And then here we are at about 1 a.m. The severe threat will be gone once that cold front moves through. So that, of course, is going to be some good news, but some very heavy rainfall amounts are going to be possible. Anywhere from an inch to maybe 2 or 3 inches of rain is going to be possible as we go through today. Something else that we're going to be tracking, of course, is also that fire potential. So critical fire risk across Colorado, Kansas, and New Mexico. So that's something else that we will be watching for as well. And then we also, going into tomorrow's weather forecast, we do have severe storms across the Great Lakes here, but also into Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, as well as into Mississippi. But again, Missouri will be clear. Today is the only day left this week that we will be experiencing the severe weather. So that, of course, is good news. So we've got severe weather today across Missouri with flooding. Then we got that fire risk out west, snow and ice to the north. Then as we go into tomorrow, the cold front will pass through. That means that our temperatures will cool down quite a bit, maybe some lingering showers Saturday morning, but the severe threat is over and it's further to the east. And then again, snow continues across the northern plains as well as ice. And then Sunday, all of this will move to the eastern half of the region and we'll be looking at dry conditions. So this is your Easter Sunday forecast right here, showing that cold front across the east, snow and ice across the northeast and Great Lakes, but clear conditions here across the plain states. But temperatures will be much cooler as we go into Easter weekend. And so you'll really notice that as we look at Tropical Tidbits' 12Z GFS run today, showing the storms moving through, the cooler temperatures as we go into Sunday and Monday. So that is something that we'll be watching for. Now we're going to look at how much rain and snow that we could be looking at. This is going through Tuesday morning. So the next 4 days, we're looking at, again, potentially a foot of snow across the northern plains, not really a whole lot out west, and then a little bit of wintry weather here with the Great Lakes as well as into Maine. Some of this is going to be ice, some of it's going to be snow here across the state of Maine. And then there's even the possibility here across Missouri that we could be looking at some light snowfall going into next Monday and Tuesday. So that is something that we'll be watching for, but we are not expecting any accumulation to occur out of this. In fact, I would say that this is overall a very low chance of actually occurring, but it is possible that some light snow and rain showers could move through the area as we go into Tuesday. But again, rain is going to be the big story, as you'll notice across the eastern 2/3 of the country. Some areas, especially into Arkansas and Oklahoma and southern Missouri, looking at several inches of rainfall within the next several days.
Absolutely. So, Jake, it's, of course, as you mentioned, fortunately, of course, a lot of this that we've seen throughout the past week, some of this storming, some of this rain and precipitation we've seen here over the course of the past week has largely run its course. Again, things expected to be clear and dry for Easter. So, again, very fortunate on that front. We're not having a dreary Easter. So, any of the folks at home who were wondering exactly how things are expected to shake out on that front, again, may have some lingering things there at first, again, as this thing wraps up. But again, going into, of course, Saturday and Easter Sunday, things are settling down considerably. Anything else you might add, Jake?
Yes, that's what we're looking at in the near term. Now we'll just kind of look briefly at the long range forecast and the hazards outlook as we'll wrap up our weather here. You'll notice that again, below average cooler temperatures as we go into this weekend. Temperatures could even get into the 30s, maybe even below freezing. So you'll have to watch for that as we go into Saturday as well as into Easter Sunday and even into the early part of next week. Things staying much below average across the center and eastern portion of the country, but then things will quickly rebound as we go towards the end of next week with warmer times expected as we get into next weekend. Looking at the 6 to 10 day temperature outlook, you'll notice that we're going to be looking at above average temperatures. So again, the long range forecast indicating that those cooler temperatures over the next several days is not going to last very long. Precipitation is also going to be staying above average, not only for the 6 to 10 day outlook, not only for the 8 to 14 day outlook, but also for the monthly precipitation outlook, showing that the heaviest of rainfall is likely going to be here in the state of Missouri. So this very active pattern is expected to continue as we go through the month of April. And so that is why we are under that moderate risk for heavy precipitation in the Climate Prediction Center's hazards outlook, showing that highest risk just a little bit to our south, but still in that moderate risk across the state of Missouri. And then we even have a slight risk for high winds as well across the center of the country. That's it for weather. Now we move into sports.
Moving on to sports, there have been a number of things in recent times. Of course, things in our Final Four, with basketball playoffs, with professional basketball, and a number of other sporting events. Jake, what are we looking at in terms of recent scoring, where the standings are between the different teams?
Yeah, so of course, today we have the Final Four matchup in women's basketball, and then tomorrow night will be the Final Four in men's basketball. Of course, those games being on ESPN for the women's side of things, and then they're going to be on CBS for the men's side of things. So you'll have to make sure to tune in for those games. The first one, of course, is happening very soon. We've got South Carolina taking on the defending national champions, UConn. Of course, UConn made it to the Final Four in both men's and women's. So we'll see if they're able to win both sides of the basketball playoffs this year. So we'll have to see. They recently took down Notre Dame Sunday night. It was 70-52 was the final in that game. And then South Carolina also came after a big win against TCU. 78-52 was the final score in that game. So both teams won by quite a lot. So they certainly both deserve to be in the Final Four, but we'll see who comes out on top later today. And then, of course, on Monday, Texas defeated Michigan. Of course, we kind of previewed that in the weekly news. And of course, the weekly news, you can always catch that Monday nights here on GWP Weekly News again, as I mentioned. So we do coverage of all of the latest news stories going on at the beginning of the week. And then we also cover your weekly forecast. And then we also look at we recap some of the sporting events from the previous weekend, and we look ahead to the week ahead. So that's kind of what we do. And then, of course, this is our weekly recap where we recap really all of the same things, but it's a little bit shorter. We do it just a little bit differently. And it's also not every week like the weekly news is. So just a couple of side notes when it comes down to that. So, and
Absolutely,
then
yes.
also something else is that you'll want to stay tuned because tomorrow night at 9 o'clock, we also have our GWP 2026 Easter special here. So you'll want to stay tuned for that in just over 24 hours.
Absolutely, you will not want to miss it. Of course, a major holiday, one of the biggest things of the year, and we're discussing all that and more, of course, often considered the holiest day of the year. So, again, we do an episode entirely about it. So, you'll have to stay tuned for that. All that and much more coming up right here from Great World Productions. And one other thing, Jake, of course, you mentioned the weekly recaps, obviously, was what all of you are currently listening to. We also have GWP News Weekly, comes out every Monday. A bit more in depth look at the news, some of the sporting events and weather, whatever may be going on at the time. And in the case of breaking news or major weather events, severe weather, different things like that, we will also go live. Again, GWP Live. And a great opportunity if you happen to tune into that and have any questions. You can always call in and have those answered. So, again, a great opportunity, not something you get to do every day. So, again, when you see GWP going live, and again, we will post in advance. Again, some of these breaking news things, it's tough to say. Of course, we don't know exactly when news is going to be breaking, but we try to give a bit of notice by posting on YouTube. So, I have to stay tuned for that because that is a great opportunity to be featured live on the air on GWP and have all those burning questions answered. Jake?
Yes, yeah. So you'll want to make sure to do all of that. And then, so of course, that'll be, of course, as we mentioned a moment ago, we have the Easter special tomorrow night. And because Easter Sunday is going to be on Sunday, which is when the national championship game will be for the women's side of things. And then I guess kind of going over to the men's side of the bracket later tomorrow evening, 5:09 Central Time, we have Illinois taking on UConn. Again, UConn, as we mentioned, is in the Final Four for both men and women. And then they will be or the winner of that game will face Michigan and or Arizona in the national championship game Monday night. So you want to make sure to tune in this weekend for the Final Four in women's tonight, the Final Four in men's tomorrow, the national championship in women's on Easter Sunday, and then on Monday you can tune in for the national championship for the men's side of the bracket.
Absolutely. And if you happen to miss one of those games, well, not to fret. That is something that we routinely cover. And as we previously mentioned, GWP News Weekly, of course, each week that features a sports segment in addition to weather and news, where we provide scoring updates on all of the latest events. So, again, don't sweat it if you happen to miss the game, if you're not able to tune into it for whatever reason. Again, for all those scoring updates in terms of the way things actually shake out, Great World Productions is your home for that. Jake?
Yes, yeah. So make sure to stay tuned for those weekly updates on Monday and most Fridays. And so I guess now we'll move into some other college sports. We've got college baseball happening this weekend with some really big matchups that are going to be taking place later this evening at 6 o'clock. We've got these times will all be in Central Time. We've got number 17 taking on number 18 Auburn. So number 17 Arkansas, that is, against Auburn. And so that'll be happening later this evening. Let's see, we've also got USC taking on UCLA. So that's a number 12 versus number 1. And then we have an in-state rivalry of Arizona State, number 25, taking on unranked Arizona. So that's another really big game. And then, of course, we can't forget to mention that number 5 Georgia is taking on Mississippi State later this evening as well. So we've got those matchups. And then it's also week 2 of the UFL. So you may want to stay tuned for that. Later tonight, we've got the DC Defenders taking on the Columbus Aviators. And then we've got the St. Louis Battlehawks that will be playing in Dallas against the Renegades on Tuesday. Well, that pretty much sums everything up for our sports report. Have a great weekend. Stay tuned for our live coverage between 6 p.m. and 1 a.m. here on GWP Severe Weather Live coverage. And then also make sure to stay tuned for the Easter special tomorrow night. And then, other than that, we wish you a happy Easter. Hope that you have a great weekend. And we'll see you back here on Monday for the weekly news.